So we have quorum here. We have some members online. Today we have 2 oral briefings. The Belfast Trust will provide a briefing on the new regional maternity hospital, and the department is also going to provide a briefing on the same issue. As members will know, we were to be briefed by the Minister on his priorities this week, but due to illness he's unable to attend today, and the Minister's briefing has now been rescheduled to our committee meeting, which is being held at the NICON conference on the 17th of October. The committee will also consider written briefings today on the October monitoring round and children's social care services. So the meeting is now open to the public. Just to remind members, as every week, that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast through Parliament Buildings and online. And just to remind everyone to keep their mobiles on mute, and that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. I've had no apologies. I think we do have everyone here, whether be it in person or online. We have Linda Dillon, Orlaid Flynn, Alan Robinson and Alan Chambers online. So just under chairperson's business, the only thing I wanted to raise, obviously this week, members will be aware of the BBC Spotlight programme on the lack of respite support for families of children with autism and with severe learning difficulties. We had, myself and the Deputy Chair Danny attended the all-party group this week for learning disability, and we had a briefing from Nigel Chambers from the department in terms of the reform of children and adult disability services, and I think it was a very good presentation and a sign that the department are actually trying to take forward meaningful steps to tackle this. But I think everyone will agree that those families involved in that programme, and we all are aware of it, and we've all probably people in our families, our constituents that we're dealing with all the time who are in very similar situations, sadly, and I suppose it's a very stark reminder that we do need to see action on this. So in the committee last week we agreed to schedule an update from the department on its autism strategy as well, and we expect to have that from the department in the new year, and we'll also be scheduling a briefing from the independent autism reviewer for that meeting also. I think of Danny and then Linda and Diane. So Danny, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to follow up on what you were saying about the all-party group on learning disability, we had a very comprehensive briefing from Nigel Chambers from the department on progress, and certainly there was a lot of understanding in the room that the department recognised the desperate need for improvement for care in this area, but at the minute capacity is not being able to meet demand at all. He did, give us the strategic plan and a few sort of direction notes of where the strategic documents are going. So it is good to see. It's heartening to see that the department are going this way. So,
yeah. Well, thank you, Danny. Linda.
Thank you, Chair, and I acknowledge that unfortunately I wasn't able to stay for the entirety of the APG, and I do acknowledge we have heard from departmental officials before, and I've met with them. And I know that there are plans in place. The problem is that the people who are actually caring for these young people don't feel that they have a voice at the table at which those plans and those strategies and everything that is going to happen going forward is talked about and discussed. So I think that it's really important that carers are part of the conversation. And sometimes it's difficult to have carers part of the conversation because these people are at their absolute wit's end. But that is not a reason or an excuse to not have them involved in the conversation and to be in the room and hear their voices and hear their experiences, because they are the people who are living that day and night. And just another, in terms of strategy and not having capacity, and you're absolutely right. And we know this is the situation right across the board. It goes back to our issue around social workers and children's services and all of those things which are priorities for the committee. So I just think we need to have a real focus on this. We know that the autism reviewer has been very critical this morning around education services and what's been provided there and how children and families are being let down. So, I mean, I think it's good that you are bringing her to the committee. That's really, really good move forward. But I just think it's important that we have a real focus on this, because these families need to know that somebody out there has their backs, that somebody out there wants to hear their voices and wants them to be the people who lead the charge on this. They shouldn't have to do the work, but they absolutely should be part of the solution.
Thank you, Linda. Diane?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I absolutely agree. The programme, I watched it, and it was breathtaking in the sheer difficulties that those parents are experiencing. My question really is to the committee and just for consideration. The people that provide respite services are the trust. They're the ones that are responsible. And I know that I have done some work trying to collate figures around how respite services have recovered from pre-COVID. And the truth of the matter is that they haven't. In fact, they've actually got worse. And I would really like, maybe if we could at some stage have the trusts in, so that we could actually question them on the level of respite services that are on offer. And it's not just sort of the long-term placements, it's the 2 or 3 nights a month that make a difference and mean that a family doesn't break down. And that's really important. But it's also with children who have complex needs. They don't have behavioural issues, but they just have complex medical needs, and getting those parents respite services as well is really important. So I think actually we should try and hone in on what the trusts are doing in relation to respite services, and perhaps we as a committee can gather some information and facts that allow us to be armed with the appropriate information to go forward. Was really what I was thinking of.
We have the trust in now in November, the 21st of November, they're coming to committee, so I think that would be an opportunity. But as well as that, and this is what came up, and so I know nearly you're waiting to come in, but this is what was discussed on Tuesday at the meeting, and it's something that I've seen in my own constituency. A lot of the respite beds aren't respite beds anymore, they're residential beds.
Yeah.
So for me that's the issue. And if those families maybe got, not all, and not going to work for all, but a lot of the families, I think this is what came out from the programme as well, if they got the support at an earlier stage that they needed, and it might not always be respite, but then it would never have reached that stage.
Yes.
You know, and I think for any of those parents it was just heartbreaking that they felt they had no choice, and that was an absolute last resort. So we also will be getting a written briefing on the 24th of October with an update on respite services as well, and those issues that we've raised. So we've those two coming in our programme as well. So I think when we've the trust, then that'll hopefully give us a wee bit more information then to highlight that with them.
Could we, sorry Chair, just to press the issue, could we ask the trust to come armed with a briefing on respite services that day?
Absolutely.
So that we actually, they don't come and say, oh, I haven't that information, I'll come back to you, you know, that we want to know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fine. Sorry, Nuala,
yeah, I also watched the programme like everybody else, and it wasn't new, which was the sad thing about it. This is one of the reasons why I proposed children's services being a priority for the committee, and so perhaps we can go back in the forward work programme where that actually fits in, because respite care was one of the proposals under that for the committee to actually either hold an inquiry or to have a focused piece of work. So if we can get back to that too, and if we do have them come in, I'd ask questions when the minister was here about one of the respite care homes, in particular Rainbow Lodge, and they provided us with a written update, but they at no point did they say why the things that took place in the 2 years previous to the changeover were able to actually take place, you know, the fact that there was no respite care. But I would be wary of us you know, getting pre-COVID, post-COVID figures in just in that kind of binary form because it was bad before COVID. You know, it wasn't great before COVID, so we'd have to kind of really make sure that we emphasise that point too. But if you go back to the trusts and the department to say that we will be focusing on those issues specifically, and I don't know who can provide the briefing on the residential versus respite. So if a unit has three residential and 3 respite, but there's 3 residential and additionals needed for residential, then it closes the other 2 beds. I don't know which body governs the the governance structure around that. But if we can find out whether through the trust or RQIA it possibly might be, and how there might be actually changes in that, and if it's possible to change those. I'm asking because I genuinely don't know who makes the rules around that, and if we as a committee can examine that, it might be useful.
Okay, thank you, members. And again, as Neil said, this ties in with our priorities, so there's definitely a lot that we can be doing to progress that as well. So happy to take on those suggestions. Thank you all. The next item, is the draft minutes. So just remember to refer you to page 6 of your meeting pack. Are members content with the minutes as drafted? And I've no matters arising. Item number 5 then is the briefing from the Belfast Trust on the Regional Maternity Hospital. If I can refer you to the papers at tab 5 of your pack, there's a written brief from the Belfast Trust at page 14, and at the Audit Office Major Capital Projects Follow-up Report at page 22. Yes. You're all very welcome. Thank you for coming today. Today we have Maureen Edwards, who's the interim chief executive of the Belfast Trust, Alan Metcalf, who's the co-director of Estate Services, Alison Walker, consultant neonatologist, and David Porter, interim director for Health Estates of the Department of Health. So thank you for coming along today, and it's an issue that we are really glad to have you in to speak to us on. So we have about 45 minutes to an hour maximum. So if we just ask for your open remarks, and then I'll open up for questions or comments from members. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Just a few words then. So good afternoon all. My name, as she says, Maureen Edwards, and we're here. Thank you for the invitation to discuss the recent delays we've encountered with our maternity hospital. A bit about the impact this has had on our service and what steps, importantly, we're taking to rectify the situation. We're here today because a new maternity hospital is one of the most complex builds that has been built in Northern Ireland. And despite the problems, I should assure you everyone, it is a fabulous building. It's a state-of-the-art building that mothers and babies will really get a lot from when it opens. It is a complex project, and it entails leadership and ownership across a number of teams, across a number of organisations, hence my colleagues being here today. So my capital redevelopment team programme manage the whole building, estates help in the design and in the commissioning and the maintaining of the building thereafter. David Porter's here from Health Estates, who lead on the procurement and help us in the commissioning and the building. And then we have other departmental commissioning colleagues, and most importantly our clinical staff, which is why Alison Walker's with us today, and they help right through the project from the design to make sure the needs of our mothers and babies are met, and to help us along the way, and obviously in commissioning that building. So, obviously it is a building that we need. Some of the building on the Royal Hospital site, the maternity building, is 1930s. We really need a 21st century service. Our mothers and babies deserve it. We have some of the sickest citizens in Northern Ireland in our hospital, and therefore we know that we cannot allow those babies and mothers to be in a hospital where we are not assured that it is absolutely safe to do that. And our clinical staff agree on the balance of risk. They would prefer at this point to stay where they are. So I just wanted the latest delay, and you will know about that from the media and from the papers we sent, is that Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which I'll just refer to as Pseudomonas, has been detected within the domestic water systems. And what I mean by that is that systems that supply water to our taps, our showers and our baths in the maternity hospital. But we recognise this has been a long-awaited project, and this is the latest in a number of delays from the inception. So a bit about how we got there, and I've given you papers, and Appendix A will give you a bit more detail. But You'll know that the top 3 floors of the maternity hospital, the postnatal and outpatient services will be provided in the critical care building in the top 3 floors, and then we have a standalone maternity hospital that will serve the delivery theatres, etc., and will be linked to the critical care building by a link bridge. There were a number of delays, unavoidable delays that have been explained, and business case approvals given on the basis that they were understood and there was good reason. So way back after the outline business case, even when we tried to make prepare the land for the building, we came across a lot of contamination. That obviously added time and cost. We then had changes in legislation and in guidance for maternity services. Then following that, when we tendered, we couldn't get a tender within the pre-tender estimate, had to go out to tender again. With the passage of time, that entailed doing a bit more due diligence. And at that stage, and then later on in the programme, we've had a number of other legislative and guidance changes around maternity services, post-Grenfell, the latest of which obviously was COVID, which reduced capacity in terms of contracting. So where we got to then, the bill wasn't able to start until November 2017, and it was handed over by the contractor in 2024 with a view to having the first mothers in the building by the end, hopefully, of this calendar year, and you'll know that hasn't happened. So I suppose moving to the nub of the problem we have today, during the construction of the hospital, Pseudomonas was detected in the domestic water systems in a significant number of outlets. Additional works were carried out. It was under the ownership of the contractor there, and they carried out a number of works, including pipe replacement, chemical treatment of the system. At handover, we did a set of results just before handover, and when those samples were reviewed, they met the contractual obligations at the time of handover, and we took over the building at the end of March. Given the history of contamination and given, as I said, the vulnerability of babies in the unit, we added, I suppose, an extra bit in our commissioning process where we had steady state for 4 weeks, after which we did further tests to just ensure the safety of our water. And at that time, we detected incidents of contamination in a significant number of outlets. So, as I said before, we cannot and we will not, as a trust, open a building until we're assured that the domestic water systems do not pose a risk to the safety of our babies. So we took the decision at that time then that we would pause, we would get an independent review of the situation, and that's been undertaken by 2 leading industry experts, Hydrop and UK Health Security Agency at Portendown, and their analysis will inform the Trust's next steps under the relevant design and construction contracts. And in tandem with that, because we know this will cause further delay while those investigations, we are already looking at remediation options, and once we know the extent of that, then work can begin, and then we will come with timescales and costs associated with occupying the buildings. So at that stage, we're happy to take questions, or you may just want to hear from Dr. Walker a bit more about what Pseudomonas is, what are the implications for neonates, and to give you a bit of assurance around the service that we continue to provide in maternity.
Yeah, that would be helpful, thank you.
So speaking a little bit about Pseudomonas to start with, obviously under my remit as a neonatologist and not a microbiologist, but Pseudomonas is a bacteria that's found relatively commonly within the environment. It tends to live in soil and water. It's classified as a gram-negative bacteria, which is just simply to do with the sort of staining that they use to classify them. However, it is something we call an opportunistic bacteria. So, for example, if I had Pseudomonas on my skin, given that I am relatively healthy with a fully developed immune system, it probably wouldn't cause me any particular problems at all. But being opportunistic, whenever it infects a patient, or in my case a neonate, with an underdeveloped or compromised immune system, then the effects could be really quite devastating. The infections can be very serious and cause, in fact, death in extreme circumstances. Pseudomonas, I believe, can be quite challenging as well when it's found in things like water sources, because it creates a protective biofilm over it, which makes it more sort of difficult to eradicate. It almost protects itself in that way. The patient population that I work with, so predominantly the very sick newborn, the premature neonates in our intensive care, they are particularly at risk from these opportunistic infections. You'll understand that when you're born premature, everything is premature. All your organs, your immune system is very underdeveloped. Their skin is underdeveloped, so if the organism's in the skin, it's not the barrier that you and I have. Their immune system can't fight it in the way that we could as sort of healthy individuals. And we, for thermal care and protection in our neonates, we nurse them in incubators with humidity, so they're warmed and quite humid. And again, Pseudomonas is an organism that thrives in that kind of humid environment. So we would take this very seriously, and obviously there has been past experience within Belfast and in fact Northern Ireland as a whole with Pseudomonas, and there was an outbreak which was happened at the end of sort of 2011, early 2012, and is the topic of an RQIA report which I'm sure you may well be familiar with. At that point, across 5 trusts, 25 infants and families were affected, and unfortunately there were 5 deaths from Pseudomonas at that time. And out of that, I think sort of neonatology within Northern Ireland as general took a lot of learning forward and changes in practice, which obviously still carries through to our unit today. And we would quite stringently continue to monitor for infections such as Pseudomonas. So, for example, there is a very regular and stringent water testing policy that goes on within augmented care, being that sort of slightly more intensive care environments where our taps and water outlets within neonatology are tested on a very regular basis. We swab our infants for signs of both Pseudomonas and MRSA are tested for us. We do that at admission and every week. So we keep up that surveillance to know that that's not something that is becoming a problem again. And we know from our recent figures that we have that under control. It is not a current problem in the building that we are in at the moment. For example, I think since all of 23 and up to pretty much present day 24, we've had maybe 7 patients colonised, which means it's on their skin, but no invasive infections in that time. So we are very much happy that we are watching that and surveilling that, and happy that it's not a current problem in the water systems within the neonatal unit in the Royal Maternity. Also, our practice has changed slightly with regards to hand hygiene and the use of water within the unit. So, for example, what came out of the report back in 2012 was the use of sort of tap water for washing and bathing the infants. So we would do a lot less of the newborn bathing within the neonatal unit, and any bathing that is done with sterile water, for example. Breast milk, frozen breast milk was defrosted in water, and that has all gone. It's kind of a waterless system now. And there's a very stringent, again, education process in place for staff, our sort of medical staff that rotate through, new starts from sort of nursing staff. There's a lot of education around hand hygiene and water education, basically. We also, instead of we would wash our hands definitely, but we use a lot more alcohol gel in our touch between environment and patient, and that's very rigorously monitored with weekly hand washing audits and independent inspection of that as well. So at the moment, although with any infection, obviously in a neonatal unit, we have a level of concern and alert for that, I think at present we are happy that within our current building we are aware of the risk we feel is low for Pseudomonas at the moment, which obviously is a different sort of situation within the new build.
Thank you both for that. It's been very helpful in addition to the briefing as well. I have a couple of questions, and then I know some members have indicated, and just remind members online if you want to ask a question just to raise your hand as well. Maureen, you said that I suppose at this stage then you aren't able to provide a timeline on when we can expect to see it now completed. And I completely understand, particularly based on what you've said, Alison, around the risks associated with that. Is there any scope to even explain maybe how long, so for example, if you're testing the system now and it's clear as such, is there a period then of how long that has to be left to test again so that you can be absolutely sure that the Pseudomonas is gone? Or what way does that work? I know that's a very simplistic way of trying to put it, so it's just to try and help us to understand then what the process will be, so when to get to a point of when we can start to say, right, we're actually progressing forward, or what will be involved in that.
I suppose, and some of my colleagues might want to come in, but part of the independent review will be to take further independent samples just to determine the extent of any contamination, and to hopefully look at maybe the cause of it, and that will inform our course of remediation, which will in turn inform how long that might be and the cost. But if those samples are clear, there may be a course of sampling, or there may be a determination at an early stage that on the remediation plan.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, because obviously it's getting to the crux of it, and then you have to work out from there. That's fair enough. I suppose the only other point then is around staff, and in the note in the briefing there had been recruitment of staff in, I suppose, preempting the opening of the maternity hospital. And I mean, even as recent as the weekend in the Southern Trust area, we saw the staff shortages and the impact that's had on maternity services there in Daisy Hill, and it resulted in a divert of labour and mums and people maybe who would have went to Daisy Hill going to Craigavon. In terms of a contingency plan, because I appreciate that's probably an issue right across all maternity services. I suppose we don't want to lose those staff that have been recruited, because that will cause even further problems. So is there a contingency plan to ensure that the staffing levels and the service capacity is sustained, so that it's for, you know, when the hospital does open, that it'll still be in place? And are those staff, you know, being are they working in other areas of the service that's existing at the minute?
Yes, and we had recruited staff to permanent contracts in advance of the opening of the building, and those staff are with us, and they're trained, and they're being trained, and they're inducted for the service, and that will be a great help when the hospital opens. There is obviously natural vacancy and turnover of staff, which will mean that as those vacancies occur, we will make, with commissioning colleagues, decisions about whether we recruit up to the higher level of the new hospital. We will take other factors into account, because there are other issues in maternity, which are issues we discuss on an ongoing basis with commissioners around acuity of patients, which may necessitate different staffing levels. So all of that will be taken into the mix, and that would be normal discussions we would have with our SPPG colleagues. What I would be very clear on, there are no plans to reverse any recruitment that we've done in advance of the new hospital.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I suppose then, I mean, in the briefing as well, it said capacity is restricted at the existing building, you know, due to, I suppose it's and that's why the reason for the building of the new hospital. Is there work happening across trusts for maybe where there's busier periods, or because with a growing population, I'm assuming that at times that it can be very, very pressurised in a building that's maybe already past capacity. So is there work across trusts in terms of maternity services, of maybe if women are able to go to other trust areas or hospitals to deal with that? So I suppose I'm conscious of the staff working in those in the existing maternity hospital and the pressure that they may be under. So I'm just trying to get an understanding if that's something that is currently happening.
And maybe Alison will want to come in afterwards. But my understanding, I mean, it's not so much a capacity issue as the infrastructure that the staff are having to work in with. I have to say, very positive patient feedback, but it's not 21st century infrastructure care, so it is very tight. But I'm not aware that it is a problem with us not being able to care for the mothers that come to our door. Neonatology in some areas at times, like ICU and other areas, they can become tight, or there may not be capacity at particular points in time, and Alice will keep me right here, but there are networks across the trusts where there would be mutual aid, or where babies may be returned earlier. Alison?
Yes, definitely. So actually came out of the Pseudomonas report way back kind of 2012 with the need for a neonatal network across Northern Ireland. So we would very much work as a region rather than 5 trusts when we talk about neonatology in Northern Ireland. It is important to remember that Belfast is it's a single tertiary neonatal unit in Northern Ireland. That's the only kind of tertiary intensive care unit you have, and that obviously brings additional pressure temperature potentially at times to our unit and to our beds, because we will have that patient flow of all the premature babies sort of less than 27 weeks will should be coming into Belfast, all the extremely sort of sick term babies. We're obviously a co-located surgical unit, so all that specialty and prolonged intensive care will come to Belfast, and then there will be patient flow back out to the various sort of district general neonatal step down units, and that flow is essential to carry on the intensive care that goes on. We are at full capacity with our cots currently in Belfast, and there is no plan to downturn those, or as much as possible we have those open and functioning pretty much on a daily basis. We had planned to move to the new build with the same number of cots. There wasn't an uplift of cots at time of move, so there's no issue there. We would love some more intensive care cots, but obviously that commissioning is not in place for those yet, and maybe going forward that will be the case. There is definitely, as Maureen has sort of said, that going forward into the new build, just the footprint that it has, a slightly different layout, it's obviously single rooms rather than kind of cohorted rooms, that we envisaged as a team evolution, shall we say, of care and development, especially in things like the family integrated care, and if parents had those single rooms, slightly more privacy room around the bedside, we would have a little bit more development of that. But I would certainly emphasise that, I am absolutely confident in my clinical and extended neonatal team in Belfast that regardless of what building we are in, we will continue to deliver high quality, compassionate neonatal care. I do not think that is in doubt, but yes, we were all looking out the window at the new build, desiring to get in there to get going with it, definitely.
No, thank you. And I suppose just to clarify, I was referencing the building, the infrastructure, rather than the staff in terms of capacity, and maybe just not in terms of space more than anything. Yes. So just, but you've both answered that. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to other members there. So I have Diane.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, Alison, for the explanation. None of us here are any experts in Pseudomonas, and none of us would actually claim to be. So it is very much appreciated, and it is brilliant that at some point our mothers and babies are going to have state-of-the-art facilities, because for, as you state, Maureen, for far too long they've been in very, very poor buildings and conditions, particularly for families who stay an extended time with wee ones in the hospital. So just a couple of things, because I do think that this is really important, and I see our colleagues from the department here as well today. And I think this is important because there's a whole range of building work planned, including a new children's hospital for the Royal site. And I welcome all of that. I think that's exciting. When I think of the Barber ward that I sat in many years ago, I don't think it has changed an awful lot from that time. So it is really exciting, and I really welcome these developments. So, but I do think that there are things that I think that underpin this that we must try to resolve. I wrote to the Minister, must have been sometime in July, I think, on this issue, and I got a letter back on the 1st of August. And in that letter he indicated that at outline business case the cost of the new unit was 49 million, and that in February 2022 it had to be amended to a cost of 97 million. So that's double the cost that was originally intended. Now I know, we all know building materials etc. have gone up and so on, but that's an enormous jump in the cost of that new build. And I think that we need some explanation around the costs and how they've accelerated so much. I'm just going to ask, is it all right if I just ask 2 or 3 questions at a time? Sorry. So first of all, it is around the cost and why a building has doubled in cost and has taken from its initial outline business case in March 2011, the letter says. We're now in almost October 24, and we don't know when the building will open, and that's a very long time to be at this particular issue. So cost is an issue. And then when I asked the Minister 2 additional questions around cost, and one was the cost of addressing the Pseudomonas, the issue, and who was liable for the cost of addressing the issue. And he told me on the 1st of August that it was going to be an inquiry and you'd work that out. And here we are almost at the start of October and you're telling me there is an inquiry and we're going to work it out. I think we do need to know the cost and the liability for that cost, whether that lies with the contractor or whether that lies with the trust and ultimately the department and ultimately the budget, which the capital budget, which is really very poor for health in that. So that's my second issue. And I'll just go to a third issue, which worries me slightly in relation to this, and I'd really like a clarification on it. In Appendix B, and you alluded to this in your presentation, you say that the contractor had tested for Pseudomonas before the handover of the building. Were you content with those tests? Because it seems that 4 weeks after, and I don't know about the progress, Alison, you can tell me that this is all, but it seems that 4 weeks after, when you retest again, there's Pseudomonas in various outlets. Are they the same outlets that the contractor found Pseudomonas in? Are they different outlets? And is there any learning from this? Would we do this? Because this happened the last time we handed over a building as well at the Royal. And would we do anything different in order to try and resolve these issues? Because it seems that all we do is delay and add cost to that. So maybe those to start with.
Okay, I'll try to take them in order. The cost, and you did say an outline business case in 2011 and hopefully explained a wee bit of that earlier. Even before we got to the full business case, there had been change in neonatal legislation, so which necessitated single rooms, for example. All that will have added cost. We had the contamination of the land. So when we actually got to full business case just before then, we built it in 2017, the costs were already up to 72 million, and you have to bear in mind there will have been inflation. There was also then after that, well, even before that, there were some other legislative changes. Since then, the full business case, we had to do an addendum, as you say, in 2022, because in the meantime we had other guidance on maternity services, which required further redesign and change. We had legislation following Grenfell, and then we've had the cost of COVID. So there were quite a number of bits of legislation and guidance that necessitated changes to the building or that increased the costs. We even know very recently for the next phase of the build, which is the link bridge, and we hadn't been able to look at the grounds before now because while we were building the hospital, and we've already uncovered now unexpected levels of asbestos, which again will have added to that. But you're on a very complex site in the Royal Hospital, and we do find we don't find these things sometimes, even no matter how much we prepare in terms of contingencies and unknowns. There are other things, but I'm happy, Diane, that we will send a paper that outline all of those changes from outline business case. I mean, even within the last 5 years, we have seen right across Northern Ireland and the UK in health and in other sectors the enormous increase in inflationary costs and building costs and the cost of steel, etc. So some of it will be actually just related to the cost of living increases and building inflation, and some of it is because of redesign and construction. So, but I'm absolutely happy that we can track that and track the costs and programme time, because I just give you a synopsis really of some of those things, but I can give you those. In terms of the other two questions, which are related, and I are not meaning to be obstructive, but some of your questions. We do not know the answers, and that is the purpose of the investigations. It has taken some time since August. We took some time through our legal advisors to actually even identify the independent experts that we would use, and even at that time we knew we wanted to use Portendown, but actually it took longer to engage them and agree terms of reference, etc., that they could sign up to. Same with Hydrop. So it has taken a while, and we wanted to use that time to be very careful about the terms of reference and what we might get out of those investigations, and we now have to allow them time to do the sampling and then to make their conclusions. And it won't be until that point that we will know the scale of it and what remediations may be needed. Are there options available? Can we look at bits of the building? I couldn't second guess that, and I wouldn't want to prejudice any of the investigations by saying what that outcome might be. And then I think you alluded to, yes, learning and other buildings. I mean, the critical care building was, I know people say, well, it's pipes. This is the domestic water systems. This is the water that comes out of the taps, etc. The critical care was the pipework for our heating systems. The contractor at that time had accepted responsibility before handover and had done the reparation works at his own cost. And yes, that caused considerable delay in the programme, but we delivered that programme within the business case approvals because the works were done and paid for the contractor. We did take significant learning, as we do from all of our capital projects, and particularly these major capital projects. We will do post-project evaluations. We will have lessons learned. So some of the lessons learned from critical care were obviously around the pipework that you would put into buildings, but also around training for plumbers, and then even more general issues around what we would want to scrutinise at the design stage, at an early stage, and in the commissioning stage, which is why we, contributes to where we are. Alison talked earlier about 2012 and the deaths. Before that, there were no tests for Pseudomonas, and actually after the deaths in Belfast, and there had been deaths in other places, but it started a real focus, and we led in some of that work to come up with the guidance, to come up with that regular testing, and that's why we take it very seriously, and that is why I suppose we are providing safer services to people. But we will take the learning from all of those projects. We have already taken the learning into this scheme. We will take further learning now from now. We've already actually started work on the redesign needed in the Children's Hospital to safeguard against this, and safeguard maybe against, have separate floors. With lots of ideas, and that's all being discussed at the minute, so we will take it. We are a learning organisation, and particularly in this way of work. And it's not only learning from our own schemes. Before we even designed the Children's Hospital, we went to other children's hospitals. There have been issues in Scotland in some of their children's hospitals. We took all that learning. We did full reviews to make sure that we learnt they were ventilation issues and other issues, not necessarily water. And we went further afield. So I hope that gives you assurance that we do learn and that we will learn from this. And we have ever increasing demands, ever tighter guidance across all our, particularly our life systems, our ventilation, our water, our fire, post-Grenfell, but even before that. And it means that they have further scrutinised. We try to do it as early as possible in the design phase, but problems will emerge, and the commissioning phase is for that very purpose, to test everything again and do that further scrutiny.
I just ask one follow-up question. So I'm not clear about the process of handover. So in terms of the handover of the building, that the contractor carried out tests in relation to the building and the water supply and the potential for Pseudomonas. The contractor said that there was Pseudomonas, but the issues had been resolved. What made you content? What checking did you do to make you content that handover of that contract could go ahead? What specific checking did you do?
There were testing of the samples as is required under the contract, and those came back within contractual obligations. And on the basis of those tests,
Those were your tests?
the contractor carried
Those were the
out those
contractor's tests?
But we had no reason to believe that those tests weren't carried out.
But you
in
don't
accordance
carry
with
out
the
your
contract.
own tests?
That happens at the commission. David is probably better placed to discuss this.
They under the terms of the contract, it set out their obligations. That's defined by guidance and best practice in the industry. So the contractor undertook those samples that originally identified the Pseudomonas within the pipework, and then undertook the remedial action as well. They then sampled the entire systems once again, the outlets once again. Those samples were tested in labs, and the results of that were within the contractual obligations.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, Chair, I'm not taking more time.
Thank you. Nuala?
Thank you very much for coming here today for the in-depth briefing. I have a few questions and some which may seem a bit silly, but just in helping not just our understanding, but actually the public who have raised concerns with us. And just to start, first of all, on the Pseudomonas aspect, and what is the difference in terms of this being noticed at the new site, and is there a risk, or are we seeing any increase or being noticed in the older building specifically? Are they run off two different systems so that it would only ever be in one rather than both? And has there been an increase or notice of it in the current building?
Alison did touch on that earlier. We regularly and rigorously test for Pseudomonas. For every neonate admitted, we do testing, and then we test the environment on a weekly basis. And we have had no recent incidents or
I didn't hear
outbreaks.
that earlier.
No, and it is,
No, we connected. So I think we are very confident to say there's testing of the water and testing of the babies. The swabs are done on the babies weekly, and at time of admission, water is done at least monthly, if not more. Obviously, if there's any positive test you'll come through in the water, the team is immediately notified. That sink is immediately put out of commission. The taps are actually, which tend to be the source, or were identified as a source in 2012, are removed and replaced, and that sink is not put back into commission until it's had 3 consecutive negative samples. But we are not aware. I mean, obviously we're aware of the sort of sampling in the new build, but our ongoing surveillance within our neonatal unit at the moment has shown no increased risk. In
Why is it so different, and why is there this positive testing results in the old building and not in the new? Like, I am not a scientist background, so I'm asking, like, why is it appearing in this new system that you would think would have anything in place to stop any infections or bacteria or viruses or whatever. So has there been anything in particular that has given rise to this?
And that again is what we're hoping that the independent review might tell us.
Do those happen like in other jurisdictions? Like, can you ever actually get to the bottom of how you can eliminate it completely? Again, I'm not a scientist, so it might seem a silly question to ask, but in terms of how for the future we don't see the likes of this again in new builds.
Alan might be better coming in, but as Alison said there, if there is Pseudomonas found, we have mitigations, we have protocols in place, and if a tap, for example, has to be removed and then three clear tests, then it has been eradicated. And that's what we're trying to understand from the independent review. I don't know, Alan, if you want to add anything.
I think as Alison referred to, it's a naturally occurring organism, and you will never completely eradicate it, but what we've got are stringent processes and procedures to make sure that we identify it.
And in terms then of the responsibility, and given that the contractor had replaced the pipes in the critical care building, and noticing that before handover, and there was similar testing, or not similar testing, different issue, but testing before handover now, do you anticipate that there might be a legal battle? And maybe you can't say much about that with terms of the
that certainly would be
responsibility.
speculation at best at this, and would prejudice the independent investigation.
But you will be pursuing, in terms of what Diane raised with the capital costs, all avenues to make sure that it's not as much in terms of finance landing on the feet of the trusts or department.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the investigation, the reviews will inform next steps in terms of what needs to be done, what the costs are, and how we might fund those costs. What I would want to provide assurance and is that the cost of any remediation would not come from clinical care funding set aside for clinical care. But I completely acknowledge it may have an impact on how quickly we can bring other capital schemes in or in the overall capital programme. Absolutely, it may, but it all depends on the outcome.
And just a final question regarding, I haven't been, I don't know if any member of the Health Committee has. I'm a new member of this term, the Health Committee, so I haven't actually been on site, so I don't know what's physically in there in terms of that is not a permanent fixture. So is there any like decanting from the new building to be then put in use into the old? I don't know if that's possible, but is there anything that can be utilised in the time being from the new building? You know, I'm talking like equipment, you know, things like that.
Yes and no is probably the answer to that. In one example would be we had hoped to be in the new build for Go Live with Epic, with Encompass, which is obviously rolling out across the region. And to be fair, the process of, for example, medical device integration would probably have been slightly smoother had we been in a new build, which was built for the 21st century and the technology that surrounds that. We were able to take some of the monitoring equipment, for example, from the new build to the old build. That is not an ideal situation, I believe, but we were able to do that, and that enables the sort of medical device integration more efficiently with Epic. So there is a degree of that, I think, is able.
And that's the only kind of element that you feel guilty?
Programme Director of Capital Redevelopment would be able to tell you. I would suggest that if there was, we would, because if there's anything that can enhance the current service, but I can find out.
Okay. No, I just asked because, like, I understand, I can imagine your frustration that whenever you heard that, you just wanted to throw everything against the wall in frustration about it. You know, it's not your fault that the Pseudomonas has appeared, you know, and we respect that and understand that is the case. But, like, you know, as someone who did have her babies in the Royal, who did have critical, you know, care afterwards, like, I mean, and that was 5 years ago, and it was all not, the car was absolutely amazing, but it needed well upgraded then. So I can understand your frustration, and as a committee we obviously have to get a lot of answers to a lot of questions that go on. So thank you for coming along, and hopefully if there's anything else that you can use in the meantime from the new build, you're able to do that.
We'll follow up on yourself and Diane's queries.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, thank you for coming in today. A few more questions just developing on from what Dan and Nuala were saying have occurred to me. One of the things I remember a couple of weeks ago, you have the acute inpatient mental health building at the City Hospital also had water problems, and I believe this was to do with leaking pipes that have been leaking for about 2 years. It seems that there's a similarity of an issue here. Is there a specific issue you're having with construction of new buildings and the water systems? Obviously this is another brand new building that you're having quite significant problems with. Water system, I believe there's quite a few £1 million involved in getting it fixed. Is there a specific issue you're having with that?
It is very unfortunate that there are three things that sound similar, and I suppose the first in critical care was in the heating pipes, and it was microbial erosion of the pipes, which is different from the leaks, although it sounds similar. And this is nothing in the mental health unit. It has nothing to do with Pseudomonas, which is bacteria contamination in the water rather than the pipes. The acute mental health unit, you're right, leaks had been detected not long, I suppose, after the hospital was built, but they were here and there, and we didn't realise that there was an actual, systemic issue. But we've had a recent metallurgy report just in the last 2 weeks, which appears to have established potential causes for that. So we are taking that report now to agree next steps. But the works, you're right, and it will be costly to replace the pipes, which we now know will need to be replaced, to remediate the damage done by the leaks, and then we're also taking the opportunity, so we will spend money. It is an acute mental health unit, opened in 2019, and there has been damage done to that building. It is in need of a bit of refurbishment, and we are going to take the opportunity to do that at the same time. So it is very frustrating. It is, again, a wonderful building, if any of you have been, and it is a fantastic environment for our service users there. But and again, a bit like neonatology and maternity, there has not been disruption to the same level of service has been provided, and in the remediation works we will ensure that we do not reduce the quantum of work that we can do. So it will have to be phased, unfortunately, over a longer period of time, which may help with the financial side of it, but it means we won't disrupt, because again, that's a regional service, and we cannot afford to have any disruption to that.
The news reports at the time suggested this was going to cost millions to replace the pipes in that. I'm just curious, is there similarities? I know we've mentioned that they're not exactly the same issue. Is the same contractor involved in this? Is this the same contractor at all? Or?
Critical care building was a completely different contractor, and that was about the microbial erosion of the pipes. The same contractor who built the acute mental health unit is the contractor on the maternity hospital. But again, I should point out that is contamination bacteria in the water rather than an issue with the pipes.
It seems, again, it's a handover issue. So obviously you'd signed off on the handover at the time, but the problems developed, quite soon after. You have a brand new building. As Diane had pointed out, there does seem to be this issue with handover, and then the problems have developed relatively soon afterwards, costing potentially millions of pounds. So will you be looking to recoup that as well? Or?
We are looking now at the potential causes and how we might move forward. But I mean, the maternity hospital was handover, and there's always a commissioning and testing of the life systems in particular, but all of the other functions of a building, and the contamination Pseudomonas was picked up during that commissioning phase. The acute mental health unit at handover, during the commissioning process, post handover, this was not picked up, and we will look more into the metallurgy report that we got. It may never have been picked up, is my understanding. It may be just, and that's a terrible thing to say, it may just be one of those things. It may not have been picked up in the tests that we do. I don't know, Alan, if...
I think the issue, whilst it was reported that it's been leaking since 2022, is maybe slightly unfair. As Maureen has referred to there, over a period of time a pattern emerged, and when we started to look back, then yes, the first likely leak was in 2022. All of those are addressed as you go forward. The issue is completely different to the other two. Galvanic corrosion and erosion corrosion have been identified in the metallurgist report, but we have only received that report. So it's now how do we determine first of all the remediation which has started, but also then the actual cause. Whether you could pick that up as part of handover, I think certainly the galvanic corrosion, highly unlikely.
Are those things you would expect to find in a brand new building?
No.
No. And what we will do now, because Alan and I thought that was it may never have been picked up. We wouldn't have tests for that, and again wouldn't speculate on how that might have arisen. But it will be something. It will, like our other projects, we will take the learning. We will look now a bit like Pseudomonas when it first arose, and then we did the testing. We will look to see if we need to then, I think we will be assessing how we will test for those kind of things or assure ourselves that it isn't a problem in future builds.
Your testing regime is, you're going to be looking at your testing regime?
Will we look
as
if
part
there
of
is a way, if there is a way of testing for that, and there may not be, but we will see if there's a way of testing for that we would incorporate in our commissioning.
It has been found recently, so we must have been looking for.
Well, because there was an independent review carried out because there was a pattern of leaks and we wanted to establish why that was happening, and the metallurgy report, which would be independent specialists, then have come up with the 2 potential causes: erosion, corrosion and galvanic erosion, galvanic corrosion, and we will then take the conclusions and recommendations of that report to see if there is anything we could have done, and if there was, then we will incorporate that learning.
One other quick question, Chairs. Something Dr. Walker said, just when you said you're testing for Pseudomonas within a unit, you need 3 clear tests before you recommission that particular unit?
The sink.
The sink?
Yes, my understanding is, again, maybe out with my area slightly, but if so the water outlets as in the sinks are tested, and if there was any indication that Pseudomonas was isolated from that, then as I say, the sink is immediately put out of action, the tap is removed and replaced, and then they test that. And my understanding is that they need 3 negative samples from that unit or sink until it can be used again for hand washing, etc.
In the case of the hospital, when you found the positive sample, when the company found the positive sample, did remediation, and then they did a further negative sample afterwards, was that test, did that replicate that particular test? Is there 3 negative samples? Do we know?
They would have there would be protocols and...
It's a separate protocol there for the building contract. Potentially, we would need to look at the detail of that. To be honest, I'm not sure that it was 3 samples at the time of the building contract, but I would need to check the detail on that, to be honest.
Can I just check? I think you told Diane the contractor carries out their own tests.
Contractor carried out the tests prior to handover.
Prior to handover, and we're not sure if it's 3, and the tests aren't
I'd need
independent.
to check the detail in the protocol on that. If there was 3 sets at that time, I need to check what was the detail in the handover testing. Yeah.
Okay. And you don't do independent testing, independently verified testing?
It was verified by labs. The contractor sent them to labs, and we have the laboratory results from that at the time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose nobody can take any offence at what I'm about to say, because I think we were all in short trousers whenever most of these projects started. It's taken that long, even yourself, Diane, given that it was so far back. But 2 projects, one of which was to cost 40 million, another 367. Sorry, one that was due to cost 57 million, another 223. That's 280 million altogether, has eventually going to cost us 687 million. That's 407 million pounds more than was projected, and that's a mitigated disaster. And I'm sure Diane won't agree with this. We could build casement with that amount of money. That's the difference that there is in between this. But I think that it points to some real serious problems that we have to have a look at, probably not by ourselves as a health committee. I think there are other committees and forums that really need to drill down into this. But just to ask, you'd referenced contaminated ground, changes to single-use rooms rather than others, and the Pseudomonas. Are they the only 3 things of major note that cost them additional money, or is there anything else that would have cost as much as those 3 have been highlighted?
There were changes, as I said, in terms of what we needed to do around fire that came out of Grenfell. There were other changes to, I can't remember the report, on maternity services that entailed different, there were design changes for that. We had COVID, and then, as I said, with the passage of time, there will be inflationary gaps, because I know it has taken a long time and has been very frustrating, but that in itself brings cost. So any project that we did, and the critical care building, for example, came within business case approvals. If we were to build that hospital now, it would be interesting to know how much that would cost compared to what it cost in the past. There's less competition in the market. Prices are going up, as well as your normal inflation. And some of those legislative changes in the Children's Hospital, it wasn't just around fire, there were technological changes, and I don't know the details at the minute, but I know we had to do a new lift shaft. That is an extraordinarily expensive thing to do in a new building. So I mean, all of those things, as I promised Diane, we'll try and track out some of the main issues. And of course, with all of those changes and with all of those delays, then there will obviously be extension of time payments to the contractor. So it will all be mixed up. But we are talking a long time. It is frustrating. There are avoidable and explainable reasons for some of, for most of it, if not all of those delays. And those in itself, the time itself costs a lot of money.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm not challenging the premise of what you're saying, but of course if we're going to take 15 years to build a building, the costs are going to go up, and I don't think that we can actually use inflation as a reasonable argument, because if you bought a house 15 years ago and you sell it now, it's going to cost more than double. So it actually is the issue of what's taking us so long to build it that is the real issue that we get to, rather than the fact that inflation is causing additional costs, because that's almost a given. But I just want to check those three things, because those three things are what appear in the audit report and in the briefing report, which is the contaminated ground, the change to single-use fumes and the Pseudomonas issue. Are those the three most expensive changes that there has been that have caused the delay, or would there be another issue that maybe it would have cost more than any one of those three? Because those are three that are noted, but if there was a further one that costs more than those, you would expect it to be included in there. So are you happy that those are the three most expensive issues that cause more money to be spent?
I couldn't say that just now. I will get the details. I can't remember offhand how much the fire outworkings and the COVID outworkings would have cost, but they will have been material.
I think it's just fair to say as well, we couldn't put the Pseudomonas in there at present. We don't know the cost of that, so until we work out the scale of the remediation, we can't really say where it sits within that, in all honesty, at the minute.
So the 407 million extra could actually go up more?
As I say, we don't know what that remediation work will be, so it's impossible for us at the minute to do that without just speculation really as to where that could be.
Almost like the mechanic hissing and saying, I don't know how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost more money, we know that, so there's extra to come. But I think it would be really useful to get a breakdown of line by line, not down into the minutiae, but if there's generalised issues that have caused extra money, how much they are, so that we can league table what it actually costs, because I think that would help with a review if we're doing work again in the future.
Sorry, Colin, are you talking about for the Children's Hospital? You lump the Children's
Hospital?
Yeah,
I think both, given the amount of money that there is involved on the site. I mean, half a billion of extra money is a massive amount of money. We need to know what it was that it was being spent on. Then just finally, there's been reference actually from 2 or 3 of the speakers on handover. Can I just, for our record of our minutes, can I just ask us, are you entirely satisfied that everybody that signed off handovers from the contractors to yourselves was suitably qualified to do so? And would you be prepared to stand over that there wasn't any issue that somebody signed off on something and may not have been fully qualified to do that or fully authorised to do that? Are you entirely happy with that? That's not an issue?
There's a handover process under the building contract. The standards and the protocols within that are reviewed by the Trust Water Safety Group. There's an independent consultancy team involved on it as well. We vet them as part of the procurement process, so they have to be suitably qualified architects, engineers and so on, and there's a series of requirements for that. So the consultancy team have to meet that standard before they're appointed. The Trust of their own water safety group with microbiologists and so on as a part of that. So there are a number of people involved in that process that would be qualified and so on within all of that. Yeah.
That's specifically water-based, but of the whole project, are you confident that for the entire project, if somebody signed off something on behalf of department or trust from any of the third parties, that they were fully qualified and fully able to make those calls? Because given that, for example, as Danny said, somebody signed off on something and then 4 weeks later it transpires that there was a problem, that I suppose a question could be, not saying it is, but it could be, did that person know what they were signing off if there was problems 4 weeks later that are potentially going to cost millions of pounds to rectify. So you're fully happy and content that those people were all able to do that?
Yeah, they're qualified personnel involved throughout that entire process. As I say, with the independent or the consultancy team, the design team that are involved, they're overseen by the trust, representatives from the trust as part of that commissioning and handover process. So they're all qualified personnel involved in that, yeah.
And the trust are happy enough that everybody that signed off from your side was fully qualified and capable to do so, and were signing off what they had full knowledge of?
Yeah, I mean, there are a series of commissioning testing and protocols, and the contractor has to satisfy those at the time of handover, and they met those contractual obligations. And in signing off, there are very clear standards for...
Clear standards and steps within that sign-off process. We mentioned before as well, we have had lessons learned where there have been issues in the past, and we have had to update those. So we mentioned, in light of the issues on the critical care building on the Royal site, those protocols and those processes were updated. So it may be there's further learning in light of some of the issues that we're currently experiencing. Again, we can't go further than that at the minute without speculation or prejudicing that report that we're awaiting.
Would it be fair to say then that some of that learning may involve how matters are signed off, or how individuals might sign that off? Or
yeah, it's difficult to say. That would be speculation on our part as to what that may be from within that independent report.
But what we do for after every major capital scheme and going into the other, where we are agreeing the commissioning process, we will take any learning. We will learn from others, from industry experts. So we've been through the business management system best practice in coming up with our commissioning regime for the Children's Hospital, for example. So we're learning not just from our own schemes, but the best in if there's progress elsewhere in the industry, then we will follow suit.
Yeah, I want to be clear in starting this to say I really appreciate that, and this is not directed at you, but they're warm words. Of course we're going to learn. £407 million extra spent on something. That's a whack of the budget of Northern Ireland that's been spent on one hospital and one site on 2 buildings. So if there was even a suggestion that there wasn't going to be learning taken from it, that would be a whole question. So but I know you have to say that, and I appreciate you saying it, but I hope that learning for definite, as you say, is taken, because this is an awful lot of money belonging to the public purse that has just been not wasted. We need the services, but I don't know if we would have got to where we were if these level of costs were highlighted at the beginning. But Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. I just want to double check that is anyone online. Were they hoping to come in? No. Okay. Look, Diane, sorry, I know you wanted to come in again. Sorry.
Well, maybe it's not a tiny question, but it can have a quick answer. You refer, when Colin was talking there, to that Pseudomonas may cost us more. Have you given up on recovering those costs from the contractor? Or is that another cost that's going to be added? What's your honest assessment of that?
I think that's why David said we can't say that it will yet. It will be determined by the outcome, and we certainly couldn't prejudice the outcome by saying whether it will cost the public purse or not.
Thank you.
So Chair, just one tiny little, and I think you mentioned just the timeline for that report. Can you give us a rough estimate at all? That you couldn't give us a specific timeline, but
I understand that the samples will be done. We had hoped sometime early October. It's probably going to be later in October now, because there was a lot more preparation in terms of the sampling, and then the report will take some time after that. What we don't know, we are hoping a couple of months, but look, we need to do it properly, and we need to know what the initial findings of the samples, etc. are, and that report.
Thank you all, and it's definitely very helpful for me that's relatively new to some of these issues. So I suppose we, as a committee, we'd like to just monitor kind of where things are at and make sure that it's moving at pace where it can, because we're very keen, as others have said, the length of time, I think, from when this was first started to where we're at now is unacceptable, and that's not laying blame at anyone. Things can happen, I completely understand that, but I suppose the babies that we'd hoped to see in it are now probably well past babies, so hopefully we can see some good progress in that. So thank you all, I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so thank you for that. Our next briefing then is with the department, and I know David is going to stay on for this section. I'm sure he's delighted. I'll just give a few minutes until the others come in. Thank you for attending today. So in attendance we have Preda Miller, the Investment Director, Catherine Hanratty, Programme Director, Health Estates, David Porter, Interim Director, Health Estates, Ryan Wilson, Director of Secondary Care, and Paula Tweedy, Co-Director of Hospital Care from the SPPG. So you're all very welcome. We have probably about 30 minutes now at this stage, because we have a number of other briefings, and that last one has gone on overtime. So if I could invite you to make brief opening remarks, and then I'll open up to members. So thank you.
We have a few opening remarks, fairly brief given that we've already covered some of this. So during the construction of the new maternity hospital at the Royal Victoria Hospital, as part of routine monitoring, the contractor reported levels of Pseudomonas aeruginosa within the domestic water systems, and action was taken to remediate this. The contractor continued to test the water and provided a set of samples immediately prior to handover. The results of these samples were reviewed and they met contractual obligations. The building was handed over in March 2024. Following handover, the Trust put the water systems within the building into operational mode and ran a period of steady state. During this period, the Trust took sampling from all water outlets within the building, and Pseudomonas was detected in a significant number of water outlets. The Trust is currently commissioning an independent review of the maternity hospital water systems. This review will be undertaken by leading industry experts and will inform next steps for the Trust under the relevant design and construction contracts. In tandem with the independent review and subject to its outcome, the Trust is developing remediation options for the water systems. Remediation works could significantly impact on timescales for occupation of the building. Whilst recent developments are extremely disappointing and impact on timelines for opening the new maternity hospital, patient safety must take precedence. It is vital that further investigations take place to establish the risk that poor water quality poses to patients, particularly in an augmented care environment, and determine the most appropriate way forward. In the meantime, the Belfast Trust has confirmed that staff continue to provide excellent care to women and babies in the Royal Jubilee Maternity Hospital, and ongoing service delivery has not been impacted as a result of the delay. So we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you. I suppose the questions I have largely been I've answered in the last section. So it's probably I don't want to go over some of that stuff. I suppose really what is clear is we want to see a solution to this, and we want to see it moved on as quickly as possible, both for mothers, babies, but for staff, who are having to work in very difficult facilities and should have been out of there long ago. So I'm happy to open up to other members if there's anyone who has anything specific to ask around that. Yes.
So in terms of the department, so what we've had is a very generalist briefing from the Trust. In terms of the department, what does that overrun of money mean for the capital budget for the department? And will it completely delay other developments like the Children's Hospital on the Royal site? And like the Children's Hospital radically needs overhauled. It's a terrible state, parts of it. So what will that mean? What does it mean for the capital budget? What does it mean for the budget for the rest of the Royal Victoria site? And these are regional centres of excellence. And it's not just, it is primarily the babies and the premature babies and all, but these are mums who've delivered premature babies that are incredibly vulnerable, but we also have families and parents in impossible conditions that were outdated 50 years ago almost. And what does it mean for that? I just find the whole episode depressing from the fact that we keep doing it again and again, and depressing from the fact that the overrun of this will have an impact right across Northern Ireland in terms of capital budget and in terms of how the facilities that are there for families and babies and mums.
Okay, so I'll maybe start with the capital budget, David. I know you can help me in terms of the children's, because I know that that it is profiled to start on the ground. But yes, in relation to the capital budget, I would expect that any remedial action will carry a cost. Without that report coming out and determining what the cause was and how we remediate against it, we don't have an idea of the cost at this time. The capital budget in general for Northern Ireland and the department is extremely constrained, and we have had a lot of hyperinflation. What COVID then brought with it was the inflationary clauses for contractors, so they are able to claim now for inflation pressures as well. It all adds to a very difficult picture, and what will happen is we will eventually have an option of how we remediate what's happened in the hospital. It will have a cost, and that will have to be considered against all the other priorities that we're trying to fund within our capital budget. So it will have a pressure. Now, the Department of Health hasn't had a lot of growth in its capital budget in the last few years, so I imagine what will happen is we will have largely a similar level of settlement, and we will be left to prioritise within that settlement what projects we take forward and in what order.
So the ultimate answer to that is that other projects will be delayed or not go ahead because of the debacle that is now the maternity hospital.
It's difficult to say that without knowing the quantum. That's what I would say. It's very difficult to say that.
That ultimately is what will happen. So can I ask, Chair, that as soon as that is known, that we get some information on that as well? It really is unacceptable, that I mean, I still, even after all of an hour of conversation, do not understand how happy people were at the handover, and what the checks and balances were at handover of that building to ensure that the building was safe and that there was no problems thereafter. But the outcome of that is that if the contractor is not liable and the building was handed over, then people in Northern Ireland and services right across Northern Ireland will bear the brunt of that. I just find that unacceptable.
Just to mention, you'd asked on the Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The Children's Hospital, the procurement process is almost complete for the main contractor, and the letters have gone out to the relevant contractors to that effect to close out that procurement process, and we are due to commence works on site in January 2025. So it's due to award the contract shortly and to commence on site in January 25.
That is exciting news, David, for children and for regional services. I talked to parents this week who've spent many months in the Children's Hospital in incredibly poor conditions. So that is exciting. I do hope that whatever I'm not a lawyer or someone who does contracts, that we are satisfied that we have actually all of the safeguards, so we're not back at this again in whatever period of time that'll be.
Thank you. Diane, just a couple of questions just as the conversation is going, because Diane, you'd alluded to then the impact on other projects, and obviously, and we have the audit report there as well, there's a number of ring fence projects there. I mean, another example of something that's been delayed is the community treatment centre. You'll have heard me in Newry raising it. We saw the Lisburn one built in much more advanced time than the Newry one was. So when you're saying there that if the amount that the cost is much higher than what is currently available, are projects like that potentially going to be impacted, or are they still ring fenced?
So I'm not sure the ring fencing, so the ring fence projects that the Department of Health has at the minute would be the Learning and Development Centre in Cookstown that NIFRS has, and the Mother and Children Flagship Programme. None of the others are ring fenced. So, and what that basically means is those projects are given priority by the executive when they allocate the capital budget out. The difficulty the department has is if we have easements in our ring fence projects, we can't keep them to reallocate within the department. They're automatically taken back by DOF. When we have slippage in non-ring fence projects, we can internally reprioritise that funding. So those, to answer your question specifically about those projects that are underway usually are under contracts. Okay. So tend not to be affected. What happens when you have a significant unforeseen pressure in your capital budget is it's starting the new things that end up slipping in the timelines. Often that's where you would feel it.
So for example, then the community treatment centre, it's due to start April 2025. I would assume then because it hasn't commenced, then that's something that could be at risk.
It's potential.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a potential. But again, the capital projects run in a priority order. Have been through a lot of reviews, and it would be the ones that we think have are of lower impact that would generally slip.
Okay. My other question was in relation to staffing, but it may not be for anyone. I know, Ryan, you're Director of Secondary Care, but it maybe isn't within your remit, or I suppose in the last section, because one of the things that we had saw in the briefing note was around the staff and the recruitment that has been done to date, but largely across maternity services, across all trusts, there are huge staffing pressures. And you may or may not have heard I referenced the situation at the weekend in the Southern Trust where the maternity unit in Daisy Hill had to be put on a divert. I suppose my question around that is because if we're going to be opening at some stage a brand new maternity unit, do we have the staff? If we're having those difficulties, do we have the staff? Is there active recruitment across trusts at present to ensure that staffing levels are at an optimal level? I suppose the situation we saw at the weekend was to do with 22% of staff sickness. My understanding would be that we would all, in all planning, workforce planning, you would be incorporating into a level of sickness for that unit to be then essentially closed, including the assessment unit, I think, which is my biggest concern, because that then meant that labouring mothers were sent to a hospital further away, not really knowing what stage in their labour they're at, or and the potential risks associated with that if they then deliver. So I suppose what I'm getting to is workforce planning is something we're talking about constantly, but in the context of maternity service, I do have real concerns about where we're at with that across all trusts, and then I suppose essentially specifically the impact I've seen at the weekend, but also in the Belfast Trust then with the new maternity hospital. Are we going to be in a situation where we'll have a brand new hospital and not enough staff to service that? So Paul, I don't know whether you can, but it would be useful. I am going to write to the Minister as well on it.
Okay, I can talk about the maternity hospital, the new maternity hospital first. I'll start with that. So we provided the money obviously for the staff, and that was required for the new build early, because it takes a wee while for nurses to be trained, and in the new building quite a lot of their nurses and the midwives that were taken on and the neonatology nurses were straight from school, so would require training in order to take them into tertiary service, which needs to be at a higher training. So the Royal itself has quite a number of vacancies too, and where nursing is concerned at the moment, they are using the nursing staff to backfill them vacancies currently. But we have advised them that we're in discussion with them at the moment, and we will not be able to make the decision, because there would be no point in us telling them to go and get more nurses if it's 3 or 4 years away before this new unit opens. But yes, if it is going to be near, they will need to get the nurse staff and back up again. And each unit across Northern Ireland is out for midwives. They're out for medical doctors at the moment. I don't know of one unit that actually isn't advertising at the moment, and we're trying to get midwives and obstetricians and neonatologists routinely. You know, it is an area that maintaining the skills in, because it's a high female area, so we would have, you know, with pregnancies and midwives going part-time and so on, you know, we need to maintain a higher cohort. I think there's work as well by the CNO that Ryan might be able to talk about as well. It's about developing further skills. You know, we're working with the neonatologists, and Alison didn't mention earlier on today, she also runs the neonatal network in Northern Ireland. She actually works for the Department of Health for a number of sessions a week to do that. And part of that's about sharing skills and training across each of the units. So that is about maybe you know, in the future, it helps fill locum vacancies, it helps fill backfill into individual units. We also coordinate medical and nursing where we can. So if there is difficulty in one unit, such as was in the weekend Daisy Hill, there is such a network in place that if we could have backfilled that across Northern Ireland, we would have done to stop that closing, because we don't like units to close. It makes it more vulnerable, obviously, in the smaller units like Daisy Hill, in order to do that. But we couldn't do that at the weekend, and that's why the Southern Trust unfortunately had to close that.
And suppose, Paula, then just on that, because obviously then we have a bank of nurses, midwives, that for situations where there are higher levels of sickness, and I don't know whether it varies trust to trust, but maybe you can clarify that. If we're making a call to the bank, and I would have been, I'm social worker, so I would have been on the social work bank list, so I would have seen the messages coming out, particularly during COVID. Was there an offer of critical pay or anything like that that can help to stabilise? Because I suppose, I mean, I think the last figure I heard, there was over 250 on the bank list, and from speaking to staff and others, it's my understanding that they just couldn't get anyone to take the shifts that needed. So for me, there's an issue there as to why won't staff take those shifts, and that's around, you know, do we offer incentives? So you may or may not be able to answer this, Paul, I'm not sure, but I suppose what I'm trying to understand is, are we putting enough incentives in place that will help, that we're never in situations like that again?
So I'll need to get the exact answer in this case for you, but putting incentives into place means it has to be agreed regionally. It means you have to have funding in place to do that. Each trust is in a recovery plan position at the moment, so actually putting incentives in place is quite difficult for trusts at the moment. We also, I mean, as you will know, we are looking at maternity and neonatal services across Northern Ireland at the moment, as part of a larger process, and workforce is an area that we are looking at quite closely, and the CMO is involved in that in the CMO's office as well, because we are aware that we do need to get more midwives in and put some sustainability in our services.
And that to me, that's key to it, because I suppose the events of the weekend have created fear and anxiety that we're on a trajectory where we won't be able to staff a unit anymore. And we got clarity from the department in February. I think it was Jim Wilkinson was here, when there was concerns that, particularly Daisy Hill as an example, but that it was potentially going to be closed. And I think we have learned that wouldn't be feasible at all, and that's something we don't want to see, and particularly the risks, I suppose, if, you know, in situations like that where there's a divert put on, that can be, you know, it's putting staff and patients in a difficult position. So I suppose I know some of those, and we will hopefully get, I have asked questions of the Minister as well around some of this, but do appreciate the information you've been able to provide today, Paula, so thank you.
I would say also, just to say too, I mean, things like international recruitment and that are stuff that is that we're planning to do in the future, and that would be a Northern Ireland-wide recruitment process that we're talking to trusts about, because sometimes it is easier to get midwives in one hospital and you can't get them in another, and there's lots of reasons for that. You know, it could be to do with the age of staff, and it could be to do where the types of services that are carried out. So we need to take that all into account, and there is a group at the department set up to look at how we sustain our maternity and neonatal services going forward. They're very vulnerable, so we want to make sure that we can sustain them, and where we can't, or where we have to rather have women move from one unit to another, even for specialist treatment like into the Royal, that we have the transport service there and it'll allow us to do that. Because I'm sure you have heard of NICER, we have a transport service to do that, but we want to make sure that we can sustain that service as well in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you. Danny?
Thank you. Just going back to our previous presentation as well, there was quite a few issues raised around handover of buildings to trusts. Does the department have any responsibility when it comes to that? Is there a standard approach? Is there a standard set of tests that need to be made?
As a part of that, the guidance that we work to for a lot of this is there's a health technical memorandum, HTM 0401, which gives a considerable amount of the authority in terms of these things to the trust-owned water safety group. So we certainly have template contracts that set out some of the terms and conditions for handover typically in a building, but we do then work with the local trusts on any project. On any given project, we would work with the water safety group as to what is required for an individual project. So under the HTM 0401 guidance that we work to, that's NHS-wide guidance, that gives quite a bit of that authority to the trust's water safety group.
Do you have faith in those handover processes at the minute? Does the department have a concern given these recent issues that have been raised with different buildings?
Again, as we mentioned earlier, it may well be the case that there have to be lessons learned given where we are at the minute. So we have to acknowledge that as part of this. So as I said, we have done that in the past where there have been issues, and we have, we mentioned earlier, looked at the commissioning protocols in light of what took place in the critical care building on the Royal side. Again, as we mentioned, that was a separate issue in relation to the closed loop systems, the heating systems. But we did take lessons learned on board at that time around commissioning protocols, and that was integrated.
Excuse me.
It's certainly, it could be the case, again, depending on where the report comes out, that there are further lessons to be learned as a part of this. We acknowledge that, yeah.
Could I come in on that one?
Sorry, go ahead,
The
Catherine.
HTM 0401 that David has referred to has been refreshed as well. There's an update to that which came in at the end of August this year. So that brings in new learning from recent cases, and we will be considering the application of that going forward, including the governance and structure of the water safety groups on a project basis and on a trust-wide basis.
Are those standard, the governance and structure of the water safety groups? Is that standard across trusts?
The HTM 0401 brings in a new standard.
A new standard?
Yes.
It was mentioned also that of the two buildings, the maternity building and the acute inpatient mental health building at the Belfast City Hospital, it was the same company involved in both of those incidents. I don't know if you'll be able to tell me this or not. You mentioned the Children's Hospital that's coming up. Could that same company be awarded this?
Yes.
They could?
Again, it's not entirely the same team. There's different subcontractors and so on as well. So when we speak about a contracting team, there are a number of different subcontractors within that as well. So to say the same team would not be accurate, in that there could be changes within that structure as well.
Okay. Indeed, David, one is a joint venture and
Right,
one is a...
Yes, that's
so
quite
it's
correct.
not the same contracting entity per se. The mental health building was a single contracting entity, and the maternity and the children's are a joint venture.
Some of the same people
Some
are
of the
involved?
same parties.
Some of the same parties are involved?
Some of the same parties, my apologies, yeah. And again, there's a number of subcontractors and so on within that, and it wouldn't be entirely the same chain involved within that either.
there's an investigation ongoing, or a report is ongoing into those 2 previous buildings?
We have a report on the we're awaiting the results of the independent report on the maternity.
Yeah.
So the metallurgy report has recently come through to the Trust on the mental health, and it identified the potential for galvanic corrosion and erosion corrosion within the pipework. So that's currently working through the next steps to deal with that, but the report is in fairly recently on that, identifying the potential causes of corrosion within the pipework and the mental health. So slightly different position in the 2 projects there.
I wanted to build on something that the Chair had mentioned just about bank workers also. The Chair was talking about incentivisation of bank shift, and this is something that's long been known in nursing, that when you do a bank shift, on top of your contracted hours, you get paid basic rate. So for many nurses, this is overtime in all but name. Has this been a consideration, where I know in other jurisdictions that bank shifts get paid as overtime for people who are doing them on top of their contracted hours? What it would do is prevent people from going to agencies where they would be paid more, higher rate, and obviously costing the Trust a lot more money then on top of that. Obviously the Minister's drive to bring agency spend down. Could that be, his intention was to build up the bank? Has there been any consideration of an incentivisation for those nurses and midwives who do extra bank shifts when they're called into in times of need like we've had, and to pay those bank shifts as overtime as what they would be? Go on.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware that it's part-time, so if it's a part-time member of staff, they are paid up until they come to their full-time, their 20 hours. They're paid at their ordinary rate up until they come to the 37.5. I'm not sure completely of. Do you want to go ahead, Mark?
Well, I was going to say it's an issue that our colleagues in a different part of the department in workforce policy would be more closely involved in. So I think you're talking more generally across all bank workers and agency staff. So not something we can maybe give you a definitive answer on today, but we can pick it up with our. I think there is work ongoing in relation.
I know it's a bit of a sideline, but I just wanted to build on something the Chair was saying. And just as a nurse myself, and somebody who's on a bank at the South and Eastern Bank Trust, I would have to declare an interest in this, obviously. But I know it is a bugbear of a lot of nurses who would like to do more shifts, but they feel the incentivisation really is just in it.
Maybe just add in relation to the weekend issues at Dizzy Hospital. It's probable that not all of the members of the bank would have had the necessary qualifications and skills, obviously, to fill or to respond to that call. That would have been something that I'm pretty sure the Southern Trust would have exhausted all those possibilities and looked across the region to mitigate or to prevent what did ultimately have to happen with the divert being put in place. It's a last resort. But I think if there's a need for more information there, we can source that through the Southern Trust about what steps they would have gone through, including bank and other options.
I'm meeting with the Southern Trust in the morning as well, so I maybe pick up on some of those points as well. Thank you. Colin, were you looking to come in?
Yeah, just back to Pseudomonas again, I'm afraid. Can I just ask, there's reference that some works may not happen if money has to be diverted to deal with that, and that we're not aware at the minute. Can I just ask, do we know how much it's going to cost to fix the problem? We just don't know who it is that's going to actually be liable for it? Or is it a case of that we don't know who's going to be liable for it and we don't know how much it's going to cost?
It's a case that when the independent report will inform the extent of the problem through the system, and that will inform the extent of remediation work that's required, and potentially causation as well.
Okay, so we're still at the point where we don't know how much it will cost.
We can't answer that, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. No other members have indicated to ask any questions, so thank you for attending today. I think that's been useful. As I said, in terms of the last briefing, we will keep a monitor on, the progress, and hopefully, as information comes available in terms of costs, timeframes, we'd appreciate if the committee could be kept informed in that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members. I suppose coming out of that, I maybe do have is there anything that you wanted to write to the Minister on, or are you happy that it's been covered in the...
I think that we should write and ask to be kept updated on the outcome of the inquiry, the costs and the liability for the costs, because it's going to have a knock-on effect on everything.
Yeah.
So
No,
I think that, and I think they should know that this is something that we're going to follow, because these are enormous sums of money that are just going up and up and up all the time.
No, absolutely. And I think, I mean, given that this, if we're talking with some of the projects, we're being told, I suppose, earlier in the year that they're on track, and now they could potentially be at risk, not to create, I suppose, anxiety around that at this stage, but it's something that we have to be cognizant of, because that's going to have impacts right across of things that have already been delayed as well.
Chair, when we know the outcome of that, then to also understand what they're going to do differently in terms, because that handover of the contract where they knew there was Pseudomonas, they did the test, it was within the level, like an acceptable level, I think was roughly the phrase, and they took the handover.
Alan? Robinson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I didn't want to intervene then on the health officials that were there, but looking at that audit report, it is scary, way beyond even health. I mean, when you look at there are 77 major capital projects, and of those 77 capital projects, they're estimated at £5.63 billion, but now are sitting at 8.8 billion. That's an increase of £2.45 billion. Just think what we could do to transform our public services. Just think of the water and sewerage infrastructure. Just think of the thousands of houses that could be built. So maybe, I don't know if the process, and excuse my stupidity on the assembly processes, but is there a correspondence that we could also send to finance on the back of that broader piece, not just on health, but on public services in general?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Or Leah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just after listening to the conversation in both of the briefings, I don't think I heard at any point, we didn't even get a timeline in terms of when the inquiry will be completed, the investigation. So I know that they're saying they don't know how much it's going to cost and whose responsibility it'll be to pay for the cost. But I think that in the first instance, it would be reasonable to be asking the Minister to at least give the committee a timeline in terms of when that inquiry will be complete, because I do think that we need to keep momentum around this, given all of the delays, really, really long delays this project's already seen. And then obviously when they were talking about the knock-on impact that this might have on other capital projects. So I think that they're bound to be able to give us some breakdown, some detail in terms of even the timeline as to what date that inquiry is due to be completed by, even a provisional date. And then as a committee, we know to come back to it to say, right, so who's covering the cost and when's the work to rectify the problem going to commence?
Yeah, thank you, Orlia. So that's most follow-up points that we can get there. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Orlia has actually covered some of it in her question, but I suppose just as a follow-on, I mean, you'll be well aware, as well others on this meeting that are from my area, of the absolutely dire need in the Southern Trust area for capital works, and no sign of them coming anywhere near it. So we do need to know what's happening with this one, because it does have the potential of a knock-on effect for others, and that is another concern for us. And this is only one part of what we need to concern ourselves with. So I think it is important that we get all of that information.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Linda. Colin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's two separate issues here. From a health committee, we're interested in seeing the projects being completed because it will help people's health and it will provide a service. But I think we're coming across an associated issue, which is that there's been massive overspends, so much so that it would be incompetent of us if we didn't say, is there somebody that we should be asking questions or asking to make sure that they're having a look at this? And given that the Audit Office has completed that report, maybe from our stand, I think, could we ask the Minister in any of the correspondence, is he, as the Minister, directly responsible for overspends within his department on capital projects, or is there a centralised executive branch that is responsible for overall overspends? Because I think, as Alan's pointed out, if it runs to 2 billion or more from a handful of projects, it's quite obvious we're not capable of doing it as an executive, and maybe the executive needs to find somebody else to do it for them if they're going to constantly run over and potentially have other facilities that then fall down the list and don't get built, and ministers have their department stripped of money because we're funding over commitments in other projects. And you have to ask yourself, it doesn't, I hope, happen now, but going back years and years ago, an old trick was to come in with a low price, and then whenever you get into a project you find all these problems, and then they all have to be addressed and it costs more money. Now I would hope that modern processes are able to strip that out. It's fairly obvious in these cases it hasn't. They had a project where they couldn't find contaminated ground. They didn't know that they were going to need changes to rooms. That's fair enough. And then they've had a whole water issue. It's just a litany of things that cost money that we would want to see spent on other good projects.
The other issue about contaminated ground, I would suspect it was a fair guess, given the age of the Royal, the buildings that have been there, that there was going to be contaminated ground and that would need to be dealt with. I am at a loss to know what you do next, but we cannot sustain a position where these overspends happen. We just give more money to the overspend. There's nobody really accountable for the overspend, and then all the other projects are put at risk because of it. These are regional centres. These are where the sickest of children are born or go to be treated. And we need to identify what's wrong and get these children and families the facilities they need. But neither can we not say that no one is accountable for this and that we just simply keep paying for it and that other projects are knocked down the line because of it. I think that was the import of what was said there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so I suppose there's a number of suggested actions out of that we follow up with the department, so happy to do that to try and get more information around all of this. But I suppose the most important thing is now that this continues to move and that we're able to track that progress very closely. So thank you. Alan Chambers. Sorry, you're on mute, Alan.
Thank you. In terms of that, would it maybe be appropriate to send a note to the audit committee and ask them to have a look at it, particularly on the heels of the audit committee the report? But they might be able to delve into some of the reasons and get to the bottom of it.
The Public Accounts Committee, Alan, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I'm chair of the audit committee, the Internal Assembly Audit Committee, and as I say, that might be one vehicle to ask to have a look at it.
He does it, doesn't it, for the Assembly?
What is it?
It just audits the Assembly's budget, not external, I think.
We're just saying there that it audits the Assembly's budget, so we're probably better writing the Public Accounts Committee if you're happy with that.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Alan Robinson, did you want to come back in again?
Yeah, look, wiser, more experienced heads, such as Alan here, has referred to exactly what I was trying to refer to. That the Public Accounts Committee is where this needs to land, and it needs to land fast, because that is just outrageous. 2.5 billion quid that is just, it's gone.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, members, then, if we're happy with that part, we'll move on then to item number 7. And it's the written briefing from the department providing an update on the October monitoring. It's at page 226. I'll ask the clerk just to outline this.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to outline the members that we'd scheduled October monitoring around a number of months ago. So we had, but Department of Finance haven't formally requested October monitoring yet or started the process. So Department of Health did provide details of a paper they produced for the Department of Finance on an exercise that was requested. So this is a copy of that document that they supplied to the Department of Finance. Officials have agreed that if October monitoring is brought forward, that they will come and brief the committee. They've also agreed that once there's allocations made, if that follows a process, that they will come and explain where the allocations are going to and where the gaps still are. So there will be an additional briefing on the finance aid at some point, but it probably wasn't. That's why the committee agreed last week they would take this one as a written briefing. But it will mean there will be another finance briefing at some point in the coming weeks.
Does anyone have any questions or that we want to maybe raise prior to them coming, or are happy to wait until we have?
It was the finance minister mentioned that there was probably overall the budget was about 750 million short, and that she was going to permit 500 million of additional spending. Is there any way that we could check via the finance minister or health minister how much of that might come to health, or is that not known yet, or might that form just part of that briefing that we'll get in a few weeks? Or
yes, we've been advised that the exact same figures that you've outlined, and there will be some decision made by the executive to allocate the funding. Once that happens, we will bring officials along to outline how much was allocated to health, where it's going, and if there's a gap still, where those gaps are.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Do we know what the department's bids are? So we've no idea about priorities or any bids that they have in?
The current bids, or previous bids in the June monitoring, was for the shortfall in the pay and in keeping up with last year's budget. So off the top of my head, I think the pay was somewhere between 300 and 400 million, and then the shortfall was still somewhere around 150, 170 million. I think, again, without getting the exact numbers, they were sort of the broad areas from the June monitoring that weren't allocated money. So health did get some money in June, but those are the shortfalls that are still there following that.
Okay, so nothing outside that we're aware of, no particular?
Not that we're aware of.
But I would hope that once they do know if there's any additional bids, that they'll be coming with information in relation to that when they're coming to brief the committee. So we can ask for that, because it is important that we can understand that. Okay, members, there's no other questions in relation to that one. Item number 8 then is the written briefing on the Children's Social Care Services, which we've been asking for, the quarterly update on the progress of the recommendations and the work by the department in regards to the independent review of children's social services. Well, obviously, in the absence of officials, I suppose there's a couple of things. It's kind of jumped out of me, just in terms of the information provided. I suppose there was, and I need to maybe go back and double check this, but if anyone can provide it, it said on the briefing around a number of items, a number of recommendations that have been rejected, but didn't give the detail. So I would be keen to get further information on that, because we need to understand that. Pardon?
Okay. I mean, like, we could figure it out by elimination, but
I'd like an explanation.
Yeah.
Like it was given for some of the ones that were deemed to be closed. I don't know if anyone has any other comments they want to raise in relation to Nuala.
Yeah, I was going to raise the fact that we weren't told exactly the reasons as to why. There was throughout the report there was mention of additional funding being given to the work. I can't remember the correct name. The workforce review that was set up for all of the streams, the work streams that have been put in place regarding the 53 recommendations and the entirety of the reform piece, so that work could get underway much more. I think the words were like just to focus on to enable more focused effort on priority areas, to facilitate greater collaboration, to improve strategic planning and enable a delivery of better outcomes in a more timely way. And I'm just not really sure if that's what we're hearing from the key partners too, that is actually happening. But we are having the collective in at a later date, so it's something that next week that we will be able to raise with them. I just feel that it's a bit of a it's a bit of an example that you're kind of trying really hard, but actually there are actions that you can take. And a further issue that I had that I thought was a bigger concern was the 3 recommendations that were considered closed, and I, after reading them, could not tell you how they were closed or even if they were complete. Like for example, the process as already, recommendation 46, the process as already intended of undertaking case management reviews should be speedier and more participative. A review of the case management review process is now complete. The report is currently with the department and recommendations are under consideration. No, that's not closed actually. That's not closed until the recommendations under consideration are either implemented, rejected or whatnot. It's, to be perfectly honest, the same stands for recommendation 43 and recommendation 15, in which they've said closed. Consideration should be given to establishing a children's and family social care division in the Department of Health. I'm not so sure you can close that one in its entirety until the overall consideration is given regarding the LB, etc., because it all ties in together. Like one of the reasons that they said was the implications for other parts of the department would need to be considered alongside any lessons learned from the handling of COVID, where the separation of policy and professional advice to ministers is subject to ongoing scrutiny. Again, I don't know if it's just, I didn't understand that was closed from reading that on my own.
No, I was the same, to be honest.
So, I just want further clarity on closed because of not done it, or were these 3 part of the ones rejected and therefore are closed? Yeah. So I think we definitely need further consideration for this. And again, the policy ones do not seem to be as far along progressed as what they could be. And they kept saying funding is an issue, but it's not all about funding, that there are policy objectives. So I'm glad that we got this. I am glad that we got it, but I think I'll look forward to the next oral briefing whenever that is.
Oh, absolutely. I suppose one other question I was going to ask is around where it says the Minister will be following the conclusion of the scoping with the Executive. The Minister will then be providing a paper. Do we have a time frame for that? It just said it's close to concluding, but surely there are deadlines, so it would be good to get a time frame if possible on when we can expect that, because then once that process is finished, the Minister's due to make a statement to the Assembly in relation to the review. So if we're able to get a time frame, I think that would be useful as well for us, so we can keep a track on that, because it may or may not be in between time of the quarterly report, if that makes sense. So rather than us having to wait till the next report to find out where that's at, if we could be kept informed of that as well, I think would be useful.
Sorry, Chair, just to say, we do have the Reimagine Collective in next week.
Mm-hmm.
We then have a scheduled briefing with departmental officials in December as part of our process. The committee's motion has now been put on the order paper, so it's Tuesday the 8th of October. And we've been told the Minister will be responding to that, so a lot of the issues that have been raised you can raise directly with the Minister, so that's the sort of 3 dates at the minute for further, but we're happy to clear them right.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, Chair, just given that this is one of our major areas that we're looking at in the first one, and I know I haven't been at the last few meetings, but so this might have happened, but have we written to the other ministers in the Executive to ask them just what their general departmental view on the review is? Because some of those suggestions will have deep ramifications for other departments, and it would be good to at least have them on record saying that they're supportive, or that they're looking forward to working with other ministers, and that they're happy to say forward, or maybe potentially to identify if there's blockages within other departments, because I know some of the recommendations are about some departments seeing massive divisions within their department and it translating across, so it might be good to try and identify early if we feel that there are blockages within other sort of departments in terms of approaching this and engaging in it in a positive light, if we as a committee are saying that it's something that we want to see taking place, because we could be promoting the life out of this and then find that 2 or 3 other departments aren't really engaging too much or aren't prepared to.
Well, that's the point I was making in relation, because that's what the Minister has written to them all in relation to that. So I was trying to get an understanding of when we're expect to hear back from that.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that will be their response.
And we did raise it in one of the sessions about asking them directly had they, utilised in particular the Children's Services Cooperation Act. But their focus really at that time, I think, in particular, was around the regional care justice health campus angle, and didn't really focus on anything else. But it's also health is the lead, and health does have to lead the engagement with the other departments. And too often do we see them wiping their hands of things, like whether it's in education, their gateway referrals, or in justice and the police response. So I would be wary of putting the onus on the other departments to be the ones who approach health in terms of ensuring that health is still the lead, because if we give any opportunity for any sort of programme or any policy to be implemented and the burden to be placed on another department, I'm telling you that they'll jump at it. We see it, we discussed it in the chamber in the past 2 weeks when it came to education and justice as just 2 examples. So I'm content to write to the other departments, but I think we have to just be firm in the it's not an opportunity for health to dump and run either.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm saying. My suggestion would be that we see what those responses are to the Minister writing them, because that's what he is. Yeah. He is leading on that, and then based on that, we've seen. I mean, as I said earlier, Danny and I were in that meeting of the Learning Disability Group, and there's really good work going on between some of the departments in relation to adult, children's and adults learning disability. So there's definitely an appetite for that cross-departmental working, because it makes more sense, and it's about a better use of resources as well.
It's just that, if we've ignored minister level, because that can create a political element, so we'll go to permanent secretary level. But so say, is the permanent secretary at the Department of Education happy that youth services is taken out of education and put into an arm's length body? Is the permanent secretary at the Department of Justice happy that the Youth Justice Agency will remove from justice and go into an arm's length? But if we end up against those if we get brick walls within a system that doesn't want to change, then we could be banging our head against the brick wall. We would want maybe to get the ministerial directions that people are happy for this to move forward, so that the work that we're doing isn't, just banging our head against a brick wall, because the system's never going to change.
Yeah, and I suppose there was a reference to it in the programme for government. So, I mean, the fact that was referenced, what you would hope. But as I said, they've said that is close to concluding, so I'd like to know when we'll hear. And if it is looking like it's going to be long term, then maybe we can write in as a committee. But I think they'll probably be reluctant to share their responses before they respond to the Minister, because he's already written to them. If that makes sense. Yep. Are you looking at that?
Yeah, no. Just to say, I also think it's really important that the focus from some of the charities is on the arm's length body, but that we don't actually take that as an excuse and end up forever in a process about an arm's length body without actually doing things.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's this, there may be I don't know, we'll need to look at the pros and cons of that one, but there may be a process towards that, but there's lots of things that is the responsibility of the Minister to actually just get on and do. So we shouldn't maybe be too diverted on the idea of action. We're always great at setting up committees and working groups.
I don't want to get
and strategic levels, leadership groups. But that doesn't matter to anybody.
No. We want to see what the tangible difference is.
What is happening.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. Okay, members, if there's nothing further on that, I'll move on. I think there's things we can ask coming out of it, but again, we'll hopefully have more information then when they come to brief committee as well. So under correspondence, then if I can refer you to page 325, and which is the correspondence list, and then correspondence is noted there from page 326. There was an item, a correspondence required with for a request for an informal meeting with the family of Michael and Marjorie Caudry, who were killed by the mental health patient Thomas McAtee in 2017. Now, I am meeting with Charles next week, but happy if the committee want to meet as well, or
I wouldn't mind.
If we want to set that up as well.
It's an
We could
important
maybe we could maybe arrange a full committee informal meeting then if you want to do that as well. So happy to do that too. And then there's a response from the department at page 6 of your table of papers in relation to the issues we raised coming out of our meeting with the families of deceased patients of Michael Watt, in terms of meeting with the phase 2 families and also families that went through phase 1 process as a matter of urgency. Now obviously we had hoped to have the Minister here today to raise these issues directly, but if members are content to forward the correspondence to families for information, but also I think we need to write to the Minister again on the back of that for confirmation that he would be meeting with the families of phase 1, because it's not very clear what he means within that response. It does say he's meeting with phase 2. My interpretation of the response is that those families are included in phase 2, but it's just not very clear, so I think we do need that clarified if members are happy with that approach. Okay. Are members content with all the suggested actions then at tab 9.1? Okay, then item number 10 is the forward work programme. The draft forward work programme is in your meeting pack at page 436. Next week we will be visiting the ambulance service dispatch centre. It's next Thursday morning, so then we'll return to Department buildings in the afternoon for our normal committee meeting. For anyone that hasn't advised the committee staff, if you can let them know if you'll be attending the visit to NIAS, and details will follow in due course. Are members content then to note the briefings as set out in the forward work programme? Thank you. And members, any other business?
Can I just raise one point very quickly? So I have had 2 or 3 cases lately where these are children who live in the Southern Trust area, but they are treated as regional cases in the Belfast Trust, but they still have some treatment in the Southern Trust. So, and it seems that there is difficulties in accessing services when you fall between 2 trusts. Mm-hmm. Is there something that we can do around that? Because it is actually a really difficult issue. It has come to my door in the constituency sense with some cases involving children, but I suspect it also involves cases with adults across the trust area. And I was wondering, because I do think that this feeds into the whole issue of inequality of services for patients across Northern Ireland. I mean, we're 1.8 million people, and we have different waiting times for breast cancer referrals depending on where you live. We have different services that you can get more readily depending on where you live, and there's no uniformity of delivery across Northern Ireland in how we do health. And this particular issue was a very particular issue about children and the services they could access because they fall between 2 trusts. I was just wondering, did anybody else come across this? I've come across it in the waiting list world. I've highlighted this over and over again, but this was a very particular issue about services to children.
I would agree absolutely with Dan. There's a very huge, vast difference in services available across the different trusts, and it shouldn't be. We are small enough to have regionally consistent services delivered for everybody, and that's an equality issue. When you say falling between 2 trusts, what do you mean?
Well, a service that is offered to children with the same condition in the Belfast Trust is not offered to children because it's not commissioned in the Southern Trust.
I mean, we would maybe it's something different.
I want to go into the particular case.
But I mean, I would have numerous cases where you're right to ask the South Eastern Trust for an update on a service for a constituent. They say it's actually being delivered by the Belfast Trust, and then you have to go to the Belfast Trust to ask them, and they come back and...
Well, the Belfast Trust have said no, this would be the responsibility of the Southern Trust. Yeah. So they're just kicking it about between 2 trusts. And this particular service is not commissioned in the Southern Trust. So it's a difference in, I suppose it's a difference in emphasis in what the 2 trusts do, but it feeds into the narrative that depending on where you live, you get different treatment in Northern Ireland. I just don't think that's good enough.
It is postcode law.
Maybe try writing to the minister in the sense that he's above both trusts and could maybe ask for both of them to knock their heads together and get it sorted out. But the issue still is there, never mind the individual circumstance. But
Chair, could I just jump in?
Yeah.
Please. Yeah, I think it's actually a great one day, and I think to raise directly as a health committee when we have all of the 5 chief executives in. Liz, you had mentioned at some stage in November.
I intend to.
Yeah, because you're right. It is. It probably affects all of our constituents in one way or another. We're different trust commission, different services. So when we had the trusts in previously, you know, they have spoke about that there's processes in place for them to work together and you know, and how they can collaborate with one another. So it would be a good example, you know, for us to come in and you just what you were speaking about there to ask them to challenge them on that.
No, absolutely. And I suppose in relation to that, we've seen in this week the announcement around the breast cancer services and looking at things regionally to ensure that there's equality of access and people are getting seen quicker. So things can be done. So access and capacity where they have it. I know it's different in the sense, as you said, it's not commissioned in every trust area. So that's maybe slightly different, but it's failing children essentially.
Also the thrust of Bengoa. The whole idea of Bengoa is that not every hospital doing every service, that it would be more on a regional basis. So we might encounter more of this going forward. So
yeah, and well, that's why, you know, I just think it's deeply, deeply unfair. The need is there, and it's deeply unfair.
And is there, without getting into the detail, is it that the trusts that do have the service, have they capacity issues, or they do?
Capacity issues everywhere, but yes.
But in terms of what that particular thing is, so I suppose then that's even looking at it that way. Probably it's more about looking at how do you get the service commissioned in every trust. Would that be fair?
Yes, or how do you ensure that if there is a need, that whichever and the trust acknowledge the need, but say we don't have a commissioned service, but they acknowledge the need.
It's ADHD,
I mean, how on earth can you then? It's an ADHD example. Yeah. How do you then just ignore the need?
Yeah. No, exactly, and I think that it actually is.
Sorry, Chair, it's a difficult issue, but
but it's a similar. It's
difficult
a similar,
when you tell families that when the trust says.
Yeah. So it's okay.
Especially with the ADHD, when we looked at the different trusts, they're all completely different.
They are all completely different.
Whilst there's no commission services, some had put some kind of service in place. Whether it was, I think it was in South Eastern, they have specialist who was, you know, and they find money within their budget to deliver that.
Eastern does that, delivers a service, but it's not commissioned. But
they saw a need, and they hived off a little bit somewhere to actually meet the need.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, is there something around autonomy of their budgets and how they're able to use that to respond to the needs of their the people living in their trust area? I mean, I'm dealing with an issue. The Southern GP Federation, they're doing really, really good work. Developed a project in terms of respiratory services. Colin, you were on the APG group a few weeks ago, and they had some slippage in their budget that they responded by developing this project to respond to the needs, and it's such a good project in terms of respiratory health, preventing people going into hospital, and that could be rolled out elsewhere then. But it's trying to give people the flexibility and the autonomy to be able to do those things, to respond on a area basis. Do you know what I mean?
Would it be useful? Could we ask for a written briefing on how? This sounds weird. How services are commissioned. Because I still don't fully get how an area decides that it wants to deliver a service, and then it goes through its local commissioning body, it gets the funding and it gets to deliver it, but the trust next door that maybe has somewhat the same need but just decides not to commission it, then at what point do you commission a service where you go, well, actually everybody has that, so why aren't we commissioning it for everywhere? It seems to be that we allow each individual area to do its own commissioning. And then, as you said, then in that southern area, they're just using slippage money to try and provide service. Well, what if you live in the northeastern area and they don't have slippage? They don't get that service. So, but it's how that actually happens and how it's ironed out fairly. It seems to be
Yeah.
Sounds like you want it one single system, call it one trust or not.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important that not every trust area has different characteristics. So there's maybe more rural areas. So that maybe isn't going to suit, in terms of one trust area might not work either. I'm just trying to balance it with that. But where there's evidence-based practice that's working really well, there's a need identified in another area, then why not? How do you look at
And I go back to my point about children's services. We can pursue, one trust for Northern Ireland, but we'd spend the rest of this mandate arguing about that. I'd really be much, much more interested in what they actually deliver.
Yeah, no, I think, absolutely. I'm not too sure. Is there anything we could do coming out of now, or are you happy to wait?
Privately.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you, members. Anything else on that one? No? Okay, members. So just that's everything for today. I suppose we thought we'd have a longer session with the minister. Nuala?
Sorry, I didn't realise you'd moved on from any other business.
Yeah,
Sorry. No, I just wanted to highlight on Monday, or maybe it was Tuesday, there was an event in the Lawn Gallery regarding research or lack thereof into brain tumours, and the fact that in Northern Ireland they can't even get access to the funding that is available UK wide. Not just Northern Ireland, but actually UK wide. Brain tumour research can't get access to the funding because of all of everything that they have to jump through in order to get it, both early stage and at the clinical trial stage. But it was one of the issues that kind of raised for me the fact that it kills the most children in Northern Ireland, or not most, it killed more than leukemia, but more children are affected by leukemia, but because of the campaigning issue around it, it gets more funding in terms of the research, but it just kind of raised questions for me around that aspect of research in terms of the prioritisation. And I just wanted to know if it could maybe fit into our forward work programme, not just in this particular individual item, but the issue of health research and the priorities, because we know that there is funding available through Department of Health and Department of Economy. But if we can find a way to fit that into our forward work programme, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Nuala. Okay, then, no other items of AOB. The next meeting is next Thursday at 2 o'clock in room 29. And just again to remind members, if you can respond in relation to the NIAS visit, just so staff can plan and prepare properly. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. See you home.
Committee room 29. Sound.